So today I'm going to show you how I made this 5-inch mandala painting. I'll walk you through the exact steps I used to create, and if you prefer to watch without a voiceover, I'll be posting a version without my instructions, which I'll link below. Now before filming, I did add a layer of gesso to my canvas. The base coat for the background color is Lilac. This is a color by Smart, and it's kind of like a light pink and purple combination. And after letting that dry, I start my stencil for my mandala. So to guide for the stencil I'll use next, I draw these lines to indicate where the angle of the diagonal is on the corners. And then I line that up with my stencil here, as you see. If you're using a stencil like this one, make sure to use either the innermost or outermost edge. You see, as I draw my stencil outlines, I use the innermost edge for the circular lines. This way they're all even and on the same circumference. Also, I use a ruler for the diagonal and the horizontal lines because the wide line does not guide you specifically for the middle, whereas using this ruler does help me achieve that rather than just trying to guide with the stencil. So my next step is to create my center dot. So using the stencil, I'm able to see where that center dot aligns to. And the next row is a row of small dots. So I start with a dark plum color and move into a dark pink color. In the next row, I move to a light pink color. My next move is to make an 8-point mandala using this cylindrical dotting tool. I create those 8 points and use my guidelines to show me where these dots need to go so that it is very symmetrical. And after that, I'm going to outline each of these dots with a mandala pattern. So first, I grab this green dotting tool and I use a smaller side to start with one dot, and then I continue to dot without picking up more paint, and I use the same number of dots for all. Now that all the dotting is done on the right hand side of each of those 8 points, it's time for me to fill in the opposite side using the same number of dots. So first, when I pick up paint, I do pop a dot into the paint tray. This gets rid of the excess paint that would be that first dot on the top of the outline. And I use the same technique for the next layer where I do the same thing but with a different color and add to the top of that prior outline. So usually when I do this technique, I'm counting in my head how many number of dots I do so that I maintain the equal number on each side. So that contributes to the symmetry of the pattern. Next, I add a layer of white dots, and it's almost the same exact way I do the previous one. However, there's no more space between the other patterns, so I'm ending the dot above those patterns. And I connect those dots together across the entire circumference of this first part of the mandala. As you can see, when I go back and add in the remaining dots, I only need to add 3, whereas on the opposite side I added 5, so this connects all together. The next layer, I'm adding a lavender large dot to start the next layer of the mandala. So those white dots did kind of separate the first from the second layer of the mandala pattern. For this next layer, after these large dots, I'm going to use the same technique as before, counting and making sure the number of dots are the same on each side, starting with the right side and then going back and popping a dot on the tray and then finishing the left hand side. And you can see I do change the orientation of my painting. This just helps me visualize it better when I add the left side. Now, I did forget to film this next layer, so I apologize. What I did was the same technique, however, the large dot started at the base of the mandala and then spread up and around that to outline it in a little bit of a different way. For the next layer, I am creating mandala petals. So I'm using a thin brush and I follow the outer edge of the prior layer of dots to guide the petal. So I start with a curve around those dots and then I inflect it when I reach the center of the petal. The center point of each petal is formed where the left and right curves meet, and this should align with the center of the lavender dot from this mandala layer. And I did speed up the video. This step is done slowly and with control, so if you're trying a pattern like this, definitely take your time, especially when you're starting out. And you can see that this is a shimmer paint as well, so it shimmers purple and gold. I felt like a few of the curves were a little big, so I did use the base coat paint to just cover up some of those wider edges than I wanted. I start the next large layer of the mandala with an even larger cylindrical dotting tool and a darker lilac than the base coat. And you can see that my dots are a little big and they don't look even, so I just go back and even them out with a smaller dotting tool. This prevents a weird layer of the dots, and also there were a few dots that had some bubbles in the paint, so I'm just popping those so that those don't appear on the finish when it dries. And also I had a little bit of dry paint in that circle that I just fixed, so sometimes that happens. I just use tweezers to pull it out so that I can easily fix the issue and it won't come into the appearance when the paint dries. Similar to the prior two layers, around this dot I do add a mandala pattern of small dots that thin out as you go down the sides of each. In this next layer, I do the opposite, where the large dot starts at the bottom and then it circles around towards the top. So it's an inflection of the prior kind of pattern. And to round off this third layer of the mandala, I am also using another shimmer paint. This is a white purple shimmer to create another layer of petals. And you can see that I did make a little mistake and I corrected it with a cotton swab. And this paint is a little bit on the thinner side, so I did make sure to go back and add another layer as needed. To start the final layer of my mandala, I am using a white color for dotting the outside of each of these petals. So I start with a main dot between the petals and dot the outline until the paint runs out. And I make sure that when I have a center dot already for the left side, I dot one drop onto the paint tray and then continue for the other side. That way the dots are even on both sides. For the final layer of this mandala, I begin adding inward facing petals that really pull the entire piece together. This brings in deeper tones to balance some of these lighter layers. I start with a darker lavender color and gradually build into deeper purple to create a soft gradient effect across the petals. As this layer develops, you'll see how everything begins to come together toward the center. Now, I start by using the outer edge of the white dots from the last layer as a guide. I form each petal with a gentle inward curve, following the same flow as the previous layers. I use a long, thin detail brush, which allows for a smooth, continuous stroke, and as I reach the end of the curve where the points will meet in the center, I slowly start lifting the brush so that a clean, tapered finish results. Each petal is built by pulling in from the left and right sides until they meet at the center. Once this layer is complete, I go back in with a second pass to deepen the color and ensure a smooth, even finish. For the next layer of petals, I'm building the second step of the gradient, and these petals are going to sit right on top of that lighter purple, and they are going to be slightly smaller. And like before, using the same technique with a long thin brush, each petal is formed with a left and right stroke, and they meet in the middle, and this keeps everything aligned with the mandala. And you can see as I add this color that the colors overall throughout the whole mandala are coming together and creating a balanced overall look. And once each petal is placed, I used a fine tip dotting tool to gently pull the paint inward, bringing everything to a clean, cohesive center. For the final step of this petal layer, I add the center petal using a deeper purple. And instead of the brush technique, I switched to a cylindrical dotting tool to place a rounded center, and then using a fine tip dotting tool, I gently pull the paint inward to shape and define the center, and this rests on top of those previous layers, creating a layered effect that adds to the depth and dimension of the mandala. Ideally, the previous layers should be fully dry before starting this step. I didn't fully let mine dry here, which made the process a little bit more tedious and slightly affected the precision. So I was at the point where I thought the mandala was almost done, but it did feel like there was a little bit too much empty space. So to bring everything together, I had the idea to add some soft pink hearts in the four corners. This really helped balance the composition and tie the whole piece together. I start by placing 2 dots for the top of each heart using a dotting tool, and then I use a pointed dotting tool to gently pull them downward into a clean point, forming the final shape towards the center of the mandala. And it's a simple detail, but it adds so much warmth and completes the overall look of the mandala beautifully. My last step after everything's dry is to put some varnish that will help seal the paint in, and I use a gloss varnish by Deco Art, and I apply with a flat brush. And here is the final result. Shiny, vibrant, and full of depth. You can see how it looks under white light, and in the next you'll see under warm yellow light, which brings out slightly different tones. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. If you enjoyed this, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe for more. In the details, I'll list all the materials and paint colors used.